As we gather here tonight on the very eve of the fourth night for freedom, a call from our bishops for the entire church to become engaged in the defense of our freedom, to practice our religion in conformance with our conscience. I'm honored to have been invited here to my own parish to give this presentation. I thank Father Brian, Louise, and everyone involved. As Father Brian said on Sunday, we didn't ask for this fight, but we're in it. I am not a politician, a pundit, a celebrity of any kind. I'm just that guy from New Providence, a husband, a father, a grandfather, who's become increasingly alarmed at what I perceive as a continuing erosion of our liberty, a deterioration of our society, a neutering of our country, and an ongoing attack against our faith. America is the light and hope of the world, a nation founded under divine providence. It has been the voice of freedom, the defender of the oppressed, and a sanctuary where people of all faiths come to practice their religious beliefs without persecution nor government interference. America, that great beacon of hope, a beacon whose light shines bright due to the sacrifices of so many who have come before us, is now faced with the threat of those who would diminish her greatness, deny her heritage, extinguish that beacon, and plunge the world into darkness. I have spoken to thousands of people over the last few years, but of all the speeches I've given, none is more important than this presentation, which I began putting together this past April. It deals with the unthinkable, our loss of religious freedom, and therefore it must be right. It puts this attack on our fundamental liberty into perspective as part of an overall attack on our freedom, and deals with what I perceive to be as a war of ideologies. Let's be clear about what we can and cannot do here tonight. We cannot endorse any candidate or political party. However, we can discuss policies and ideologies that affect us as a people of faith. Those are the guidelines we will follow. I will boldly speak the truth as I see it. What you decide to do as citizens vis-a-vis elections, your personal choice, guided by your informed conscience. Kathleen Sebelius, Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, an unelected bureaucrat, has decreed that our First Amendment freedom to practice our religion in conformance with our conscience, a right enshrined in the First Amendment to our Constitution, and with roots going back to the Magna Carta, must be rendered null and void when consideration is given to certain rights as formulated in the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. The executive branch of our government has overstepped its authority, and the legislative branch of government has let the American people down by enabling this piece of legislation to become law, and by leaving decisions that would rock the very foundations of our republic in the hands of bureaucrats who are unanswerable to the American people. We are now left with a situation whereby only the judicial branch of government can right this wrong. And looking at a court that is so ideologically evenly split, we face the very real possibility that our right to freedom of religion, a sacred cornerstone of American law and culture, rests on the weary shoulders of one man, Justice Anthony Kennedy. It should never have gotten this far. This problem we face is not a Catholic problem, even though it is the Catholic Church that is clearly in the crosshairs on this issue. No, this is a problem for all people of faith. Understand that the Catholic Church, with its hierarchy of authority and its moral absolutism, is the largest obstacle standing in the way of a progressive, secular ideology intent on subjugating religion to the decrees of the state. Understand, when a bully enters a schoolyard and he beats up the largest child there, he ensures that all others will be intimidated and succumb to his demands. If the Catholic Church is forced to bow down to the state, rest assured that the state will tolerate no deviation from its demands from any other religious organization. So understand that while this presentation was first written for a Catholic audience, it is equally applicable to all people of faith. And one more thing as we move on. If this attack on our religious freedom is overturned by the Supreme Court, don't think for a minute that everything is fine and that we can forget this episode in American history. The administration made a conscious, deliberate attempt to deny us our First Amendment rights. The fact that they may be stopped in no way mitigates that fact. If a kidnapper is apprehended in the act of kidnapping, he is still a kidnapper. Let me take a moment to clarify that I'm here tonight speaking only for myself. I do not speak for the church, for Father Brian, the Knights of Columbus, the Faith and Life Society, or any other organization that I might be associated with. If you have problems with what I'm about to say, address them to me and to me alone. And since we have a lot of ground to cover, as I said before, let's just hold all comments or questions until the end, and then we'll take care of it. To sit back, hoping that someday, some way, someone else will make things right, is to go on feeding the crocodile, hoping that he will eat you last, but eat you he will. Words of Ronald Reagan. I have been critical of the church hierarchy and some of the laity for having been virtually silenced about what I perceive as the erosions of our liberties and the intrusion of government into our lives for some time now. They have been feeding the crocodile and hoping that he would eat them with us. The recent edicts coming down from the administration as part of the implementation of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act have been a shot across the bow of the church and a harbinger of the dangers facing both the church and the nation as we contemplate the impossible, the denial of our First Amendment rights. For the church fathers, I think they finally realize the crocodile has come for them, and they have mobilized to defend their sacred turf. Better late than never, and I commend the Holy Father, the bishops, our priests, and the Catholic faithful for recognizing the dangers that lie ahead. I believe it is important to note that this direct attack against our freedom to worship in accordance with our conscience did not materialize out of a vacuum. We should have seen this coming. Many of us did. It is part and parcel of a progressive ideology that promotes big government, taking decisions out of the hands of individuals, that recognizes an elite ruling class that knows what is best for all of us, and that looks at the Constitution and the Judeo-Christian heritage as nothing more than archaic roadblocks to their agenda. If we are to safeguard our freedom of religion, it must be part of an overall effort to safeguard all of our freedoms, to uphold the Constitution as the founding document of our republic, to return to our founding principles, to restore the virtue of personal responsibility, and to stop this progressive ideology from fundamentally changing America. To use the words of Alex de Tocqueville, which I'll refer to later, America is great because she is good. If she ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. Audentes fortuna juvat. Fortune favors the bold. These words from Virgil's Aeneid, circa 20 BC, are the basic theme of everything I'm saying tonight. If you forget everything else, remember those words. Audentes fortuna juvat. We have been taught that the meek shall inherit the earth. I suggest to you that it is the bold who will determine exactly what that inheritance is going to look like. So on that note, let me first thank my friend, Father Brian, Louise, the entire Faith and Life Society for being brave enough, yes, bold enough to sanction our gathering here to have this presentation. That fact in itself, that it requires boldness for a people of faith to gather on church grounds to discuss the political environment in our country, speaks volumes about how far we have come from the founding principles. Tonight I will speak of competing ideologies, progressive and conservative. I will not be speaking about political parties because neither party is homogeneous in this ideological makeup, but rather of policies that affect our freedom, our prosperity, the future we leave our children, and yes, our very way of life. It'll be clear to you that I believe the conservative path is the right path, and that a progressive agenda and the failure of both parties to truly act as stewards of the American dream has led us to the place we now find ourselves as a nation. I see the recent attempt to have the church and people of faith bow down at the altar of progressive secularism as nothing less than a blatant attempt to strip away our right to practice our religion in conformance with our conscience. In my opinion, this is the next step of an ongoing intrusion of a bureaucratic leviathan of a government into every aspect of our lives. And I believe it is driven by that progressive ideology that believes an elite political class knows better than its citizens how to raise families, how much money we should each make, how much we should keep, and how much of the fruits of our labor they should take to redistribute as they see fit. So this is nonpartisan. Each party and every politician is free to choose the ideology and the policies that they will champion. And we the people, even if we are a people of faith, have the right to assemble peaceably at the venue of our choosing to discuss these policies, this war of ideologies which will determine the future of our republic. Some of you may agree with me, and some of you may not. That's the beauty of our country. I have not been invited here tonight to debate the issues, but merely to give you my thoughts. Each of you will have your own opinions, form your own conscience, and support the candidate or the party of your choice. On the eve of this fourth night of freedom, I think it is necessary to establish why we are here, why we can gather on church grounds to have an open discussion about politics, and to raise questions and concerns of the policies of our government and the direction our elected officials are taking our nation. I believe we have a civic obligation as citizens and a moral obligation as a people of faith to gather, to hear our concerns about our nation, our church, and the future we leave to future generations of Americans. And then to take decisive actions to safeguard that future which we envision for our children and our grandchildren. And my friends, that's what it's all about, the next generation. Thank you, Jim. And so I offer the following justifications for a moral people to be here tonight. Let me offer the words of Pope Benedict XVI in his January 19th address to the bishops of the United States during their ad limina visits to the Vatican. I quote, "One of the most memorable aspects of my pastoral visit to the United States was the opportunity it afforded me to reflect on America's historical experience of religious freedom, and specifically the relationship between religion and culture. At the heart of every culture, whether perceived or not, is a consensus about the nature of reality and the moral good, and thus about the conditions for human flourishing. In America, that consensus, as enshrined in your nation's founding documents, was grounded in a worldview shaped not only by faith, but a commitment to certain ethical principles deriving from nature and nature's God. Today, that consensus has eroded significantly in the face of powerful new cultural currents, which are not only directly opposed to core moral teachings of the Judeo-Christian tradition, but increasingly hostile to Christianity as such. The Church's witness then is of its nature public. She seeks to convince by proposing rational arguments in the public square. The legitimate separation of church and state cannot be taken to mean that the church must be silent on certain issues, nor that the state may choose not to engage or be engaged by the voices of committed believers in determining the values which will shape the future of the nation. End quote. And the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, in their writing, Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, stated, quote, "It is important for all citizens to see beyond party politics, to analyze campaign rhetoric critically, and to choose their political leaders according to principle, not party affiliation or mere self-interest." End quote. The bishops go on to say, quote, "Responsible citizenship is a virtue, and participation in political life is a moral obligation." End quote. And from the Gospel according to Nick, we have been taught, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, and to God the things that are God. But when Caesar condones the murder of innocent children, when Caesar strips the citizens of every vestige of self-respect, condemning generation after generation to believe that only Caesar can care for them, depriving them of the very human dignity that comes with self-reliance and personal responsibility, and takes their very freedom in return for his largesse. And when Caesar calls for people of faith to abandon their consciences and to bow down at the altar of the state, then it is time when we as Catholics, when we as citizens must stand up and say, "No, Caesar, this will not stand." Historians will one day write about the battle for the very soul of the nation that took place in the second decade of the 21st century. Pages are even now being written, and whether you all like it or not, you have a part in this story. Will the dreams of America's first revolutionaries continue to live on, promising liberty, religious tolerance, and unlimited opportunity to future generations of Americans, or will they perish on the march? What happened to our nation? How did things get so bad, so fast? Who's to blame? Can things be corrected? If so, who will do it? And how can each of us, with only one voice and one vote, overcome so much corruption and make a difference? My friends, if we want to be perfectly honest about this, both political parties are to blame, and if we look in the mirror, we have to acknowledge that we bear most of the responsibility for where we are today. Let me quote the words of Daniel Webster. Quote, "I apprehend no danger to our country from a foreign foe. Our destruction, should it come at all, will be from another quarter. From the inattention of the people to the concerns of their government, from their carelessness and negligence. I must confess that I do apprehend some danger. I fear that they may place to implicit confidence in their public servants and fail properly to scrutinize their conduct, that in this way they may be made the dupes of designing men and become the instrument of their own undoing. Make them intelligent, and they will be vigilant. Give them the means of detecting the wrong, and they will apply the remedy." End quote. Yes, my friends, we've all been way too busy leading our lives, raising our families, going to work, paying our taxes, trying to contribute to society, and all along hoping that those who we elected would be diligent stewards of our country, our moral principles, and our precious liberty. We didn't pay attention as our freedoms were eroded over decades of government growth. Our treasures squandered for political power, and the very future of our children mortgaged the personal gain of those to whom we entrusted the American dream. It seems that those of us with a conservative bent, those of us who feel that the traditions and moorings which made this country great are still valid, who believe that the founding principles still apply, that our religious beliefs are sacrosanct to our society, that the Constitution still matters. We've always been told to remain quiet. When we speak, we offend people. We say the truth for what we see, and other people tell us, be quiet. You're not being politically correct. We should just be quiet, docile, pay our taxes, and the intellectual elites will again tell us how to raise a family, what to do with our money, and how much of our religious beliefs we can practice lest we offend. The time has come, the time has passed for us to find our voices, to speak the truth as we see it, each and every one of us, to refuse to be muzzled by political correctness, and to hold accountable those who have violated their obligations as representatives of the people. This call to boldness and to defending our faith is at the very heart of the bishop's call for this fortnight of freedom. This means we've got to come out of our comfort zones, and we have to become engaged. And I can tell you, my friends, believe me, I did not want to get into this fight. For 58 of the 62 years that I've been on this earth, I paid no attention to what was going on. I enjoyed the freedoms and the liberties and took for granted all that had been given to me by my grandparents and my parents. I just enjoyed my life and my family. But eventually the time comes when you realize that this country and our freedoms, all we have, all that we take for granted, and that immigrants come and see and hold dear, it's important and it's worth fighting for. Things happen when you find your voice. Different things happen to different people. But you start to become bolder. You start to frame the narrative instead of having other people tell you how things are. You learn the truth and you start to speak the truth. And for me, when I found my voice, there was one incident, I'm going to relate it to you now. As some of you may know, not all of you, I've spent a lot of time going around the state organizing different groups of people to become engaged, as the founders wanted us to do. And there was a group that we founded right down the road in Scotch Plains Family. And there was a room like this, and there were about 90 people there. And I was speaking to them as I'm speaking to you now. And during the course of my presentation, who comes walking in? But Congressman Lance. Now, no offense, Congressman Lance, he happened to be the guy that walked in. He's my congressman, your congressman. He just happened to be there. I said, Congressman, please have a seat. There was a table just to the side of it. He sat, I continued to talk. I came to a point where I was trying to tell people that you must relay your concerns about everything to your elected representatives. And I said, let me not do this in the third person tonight with Congressman Lance. So I turned and I said, Congressman Lance, let me tell you what's on our mind. And I began to speak of the fiscal responsibility, the limited government, the things that we happen to be talking about there. And then I stopped, and I said, Congressman, wait. Let me stop political rhetoric. I'm not a politician. I'm just a guy up the road. I've come kids, I have grandkids. Let me talk from my heart and not from these political words. I said, Congressman, we elected you for so many things, but really what it comes down to for me, and probably for most people in this room, is this. Congressman, we elected you to safeguard and be the steward of this American dream, this inheritance that we want to pass down to our children and our grandchildren. So, Congressman, we're going to watch you, and when you speak and when you vote, if what you do is preserving the freedoms
freedoms to be whatever you want to be, the freedoms of religion, a better life. If this is what you do, Congressman, you will have no better ally than me and the 90 people in this room. We will support you vocally, financially, we'll have your back. But on the flip side, Congressman Lance, if we see that you are voting and you are doing things that are going to squander the inheritance of my children and my grandchildren, then, Congressman, I will be your worst nightmare. Now, if someone told me a few years ago that I would be in a room full of people and speak plainly like that to my congressman, I would have told you that you were crazy. But that was then, and this is now. We're in a new world, and we need to speak what's on our mind. We need to speak the truth as we see it. I, for one, have grown tired of being told to be politically correct, to avoid the use of rhetoric, to be civil, to compromise, to just get along. I will not compromise what I have to say when those who are against me just hurl epithet after epithet. I will not compromise what I have to say while those against me use race baiting and class envy against me. And I will not restrain my passions when every call made for fiscal responsibility in this country is met with cries that conservatives want to kill elderly and the children. My friends, we're talking about our freedoms. And if you won't fight for your freedoms, what will we fight for? You remember the movie Braveheart? Good old Mel Gibson, as he had his troops ready for battle against the English at Stirling, and turned to them, "Yes, fight and you may die. Run and you will live, at least a while. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all those days from this to that, to come back here as young men and face your enemies and tell them, you may take our lives, but you will never take our freedom?" Are those words too extreme for the battle we're in today? Is the rhetoric too high? I offer you the words of Barry Goldwater. Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. If you believe that we are merely engaged in a debate of ideas, that whatever the outcome, America will continue on as it has in the past, and that your life might just be merely inconvenienced, I suggest to you that, like me and so many others, you hadn't been paying attention for a long, long time. We are at war, my friends, a war for the very soul of America. The winner of this war of ideologies will determine the America that future generations will inherit. Will the idea of personal responsibility prevail over the idea of a nanny state, taking care of our every need in exchange for our freedoms? Will the idea of free markets, entrepreneurship, unlimited potential prevail over government-owned and subsidized businesses, selected bailouts with taxpayer monies, and central planning by bureaucrats who have never risked treasury nor run a business? Will the idea of American sovereignty and secure borders and respect for those who come here legally and contribute to our society win out over the current politically correct pandering to those who violate our laws, cross our borders with impunity, often being rewarded with the fruits of our labor and granted greater privileges than American citizens? Will our most sacred freedoms, the freedom to practice our religion in conformance with our conscience and our freedom of speech, prevail? Or will the church be told by a tyrannical bureaucracy that it must bow before the altar of secular progressivism? And will people of faith be told by the government in its magnificent benevolence that it will allow them 1 year to come to terms with the violation of their conscience? And will priests, ministers, and rabbis be told that the message they deliver to their congregations must comply with and be censored by the wishes of a political class which is determined to erase religious practice from American society? Will the idea that the Constitution is a sacred document, the foundation upon which our nation was formed, fall to the idea that the Constitution is just an outdated piece of paper, no longer relevant, and therefore no longer binding on the citizens nor the government? Imagine, if you will, the future that you leave to your children, the inheritance that you grant to your grandchildren under each of these two opposing ideologies. Will future generations be dependent on an all-powerful government for their health care, their livelihood, their education, their housing, their every need, yet surrender more and more of their treasure, more of their choices, more of their freedom in return? Or will they be the makers of their own dream, determining their own futures, responsible for their own lot in life, able to worship their God as they see fit? And will they be faced with then unlimited potential and opportunity to be anything they want to be in this great nation if they're willing to make the sacrifices and do those things which must be done to achieve unlimited goals? My friend, we are indeed at war. There can be no compromise. There can be no partial peace. How do you compromise on the laws of liberty, on the unfettered practice of our religion, on the enslavement of our children to an unconscionable debt? We must defeat this radical ideology that is ruling our country. We must oust from office any and all, regardless of party affiliation, who do not espouse simple tenets of individual liberty, personal responsibility, free markets, limited government acting in compliance with its constitutional authority, and respect for the sacred rights guaranteed to us by our Creator, not by our government. America has survived external threats of all kinds. There is no outside force that can defeat this great nation. Our greatest threat comes from within, and it's supported by an ever-increasing number of citizens who believe in entitlements without contribution, from a people who feel threatened by the moral standards that were embraced by a people of faith, and by a people infected with class envy and enslaved by their political masters who pander to their every need in return for their vote. The current political philosophy driving our national agenda poses a greater threat to the survival of our republic than any foreign force we have faced. Whether due to total incompetence or malicious intent, it is the clear and present danger that we face today. If we fail to overturn this radical agenda that is eroding our liberties, we will forever be branded as the generation that refused to fight, the generation that lost the dream, the generation that forgot that this nation was founded under divine providence to forever be a beacon of hope and liberty for the entire world. My friends, I cannot fathom telling my children and my grandchildren that I stood by and did nothing and watched this happen. Each of you, I believe, has to face that same question. If you think things are wrong, if you think there are problems, and you don't do anything about it, what do you tell the kids? What do you tell the grandkids? What do we tell the future generations of America? We were too busy, we were too tired, we didn't care. These are the things you have to think about. Or you can take up your role as the guardians of the street. Before you decide whether you want to act or not act, I have a message from my fellow Catholics concerning our pro-life movement. Back in 2010, right here in this hall, I addressed the pro-life dinner, and I want to share some of my comments from that night. And yes, these comments do directly go against the current administration, but it goes to the very heart of who we are as Catholics and our beliefs.
These were my comments from that night. Elections have consequences, and in the end, we really do get the kind of government that we choose. That night, someone said that it's a shame that New Jersey, a predominantly Catholic state, still does not have a parental notification requirement before a child has an abortion. I said it's not a shame, it's a fact. We Catholics voted for the representatives we have. We have 2 senators who will continue to sanction the murder of the unborn because we Catholics, the majority in the state, voted for them. That night, there were complaints about the policies emanating out of Washington. And I said, someone has to tell you, 54% of Catholics voted for this president. Catholics, people, some of our bishops and religious, bought into this nebulous notion that was being preached about social justice. And they supported candidates who espoused that thing. But did they not realize that the social justice that was being sold was nothing more than redistribution of wealth and class envy and subjugation of entire generations of people for a vote? Shouldn't we be looking for social justice as defined by charity, unbridled opportunity, personal responsibility, and individual freedom? And shouldn't charity begin at home, then be supplemented by family, and then church, with government only as a last resort, and only for those who truly need it? And for those who truly need it, understand, we, each and every one of us, have a moral obligation to do everything that we can to care for them. That is who we are as Christians. But that was not the case. The Catholics voted for their social justice, and along with that, they got candidates who gave them unbridled abortion rights. 54% of Catholics elected the most anti-life president we have had. 54% of Catholics gave him a Congress who would rubber stamp his policies. 54% of Catholics therefore consented to the de facto nomination of 2 Supreme Court justices who will undoubtedly vote down any legislation that might limit abortion on women. Elections have consequences. I told them that night, when you go home, I admonish you to pray as hard as you ever have for the continued health and safety of Justice Scalia, Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Justice Roberts, and Justice Kennedy. Because if, God forbid, something would have happened to one of those men, then that 54% of Catholics would have sealed the fate of our pro-life movement. We could be saddled for 20 or 30 years with a court which would overturn any progress we could ever achieve, and which would uphold legislation that would render our efforts harmless. We would be left with prayer and prayer alone. And while that is the strongest tool that we have, would it hurt to have some legislative and judicial clout on our side also? That was 2010. Since then, after witnessing firsthand the imminent danger, the face of the loss of our religious freedom, the church hierarchy and much of the laity have come to understand that elections do have consequences and have taken up the fight, mobilizing in defense of our most sacred freedoms. So if you accept the responsibility to become engaged in this process, to do something, the questions are, what can I do and how can I make a difference? The first question has a very easy answer, but it's very hard. Activism plus commitment equals success. We cannot win this battle for the soul of America without action. Real action. Time-consuming, uncomfortable, I really don't want to do this type of action. That does not mean exchanging emails all day from the comfort of your home. It does not mean coming out, sitting in a meeting or a presentation, going home, waiting for somebody else to put on another meeting or a presentation a month from now. No, it means getting involved day to day. It means learning the nuts and bolts of motivating other people, getting out the vote for the candidate of your choice,
and influencing as many others as you can to do what you think is the right thing to do. Remember the words of the U.S. Council of Catholic Bishops. Responsible citizenship is a virtue, and participation in political life is a moral obligation. And we cannot win this battle without commitment, day after day, week after week, until the battle is won. You see, whatever we correct still requires vigilance. We got in trouble because we didn't pay attention. So whatever action you take on behalf of what you believe to be the right thing, you're committing to follow up on that for the rest of your lives. That's the America that we need. And as for the second question, who will listen to my one voice, my one vote? How do I accomplish anything? I attended a meeting in Charleston back in January, and Herman Cain spoke at one of the sessions. He answered that question with a biblical reference that we all understand. He spoke of David and the impossible battle against Goliath. And Cain said, when we act together, we are an army of Davids, and there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. But my friends, I think there's even more to it than that. We are Americans, and when we speak of American exceptionalism, we are not talking about the political class or the bureaucracy. We're talking about the American people. America is a very special place. We swear no allegiance to a king. We have no loyalty. Our nation was founded on an idea that we are all created equal, and that we have been granted certain inalienable rights by our Creator, not by our government. We believe that government derive their just power from the consent of the governed. My friends, that's you and I. Those of us who believe in the founding principles, who understand that divine providence at the hand in the formation of this country, realize that there's something special ingrained in the American spirit, some inherent yearning for liberty, a desire to be left alone, to make our own way, to seek our own happiness, coupled with a unique belief in charity and a hand extended to our fellow Americans. It is this spirit, this flame that burns in each and every one of us, this drive for freedom that prompted the first settlers to cross an ocean, to form a new life in an untamed land, in order to flee religious persecution. It is this spirit that allowed the colonists to rise up against British hegemony in a revolt against burdensome taxation, win an impossible war, and forge a nation that would become the symbol of liberty for the rest of the world. It is this spirit that drove the pioneers westward, spurred on by their rugged individualism, that characterized the people who would make their own way in pursuit of America's manifest destiny. And it is that same spirit many, many years later that inspired our 20th century pioneers, our astronauts, to rise to the call of a charismatic young president, conquer space, and walk the moon. And it is that same spirit that has caused American men and women to risk all, to make the ultimate sacrifice. On the beaches of Normandy, on the island of Iwo Jima, in the jungles of Southeast Asia, and in the hostile environments of Afghanistan and Iraq, in a heroic effort to come to the aid of brothers and sisters who they did not know, but who deserved freedom. My friends, that spirit, that very essence of being American, can never be taken from you. Politicians may squander our treasure, leaving us bankrupt. They may decimate our economy, leaving us jobless. They may confiscate our wealth through burdensome taxation, and they may try to regulate every aspect of our lives in a veiled attempt to enslave us. But they can never forcibly take away your American spirit. The only way you can lose that God-given blessing is to surrender it, turn your backs on it, to trade it in, if you will, for some empty promise of government largesse. I hope you understand the folly of such trade. Unfortunately, countless Americans weaned on generation and generation of government handouts, perpetuated by this progressive liberal ideology, have indeed surrendered that spirit. They have accepted a new way of life, dependent on the bureaucratic leviathan for their every need. No longer the makers of their own dreams, no longer the guardians of their children's future. And as more and more of these Americans accept yoke and slavery in return for the vote, the more powerful the bureaucracy becomes, the more insatiable the hunger of the beast. We must remain vigilant, lest we too succumb to the silence of the nanny state. So I repeat, that very essence of being American can never be taken from you. It's yours to hold forever. It can only be lost if you willingly surrender it. So cherish it, nourish it, draw strength from it, pass it on to your children. Keep that flame burning, always keep it. Inside of you, hold a bright vision of the future of this country. Because when you come together, that flame burns brighter than each of us are alone. And when we come together in a room like this, and if we happen to all believe and our passions begin to rise, you have a bonfire burning right here in the summer. And if this happens come election day across the country, if it happens in Texas, in New York, in Louisiana, in Alaska, in Hawaii, then you'll have a firestorm burning across the country, purging us of the charlatans and the corruption. And out of this cauldron, using the very molds that were given to us by the founders, we can reforge this nation and restore American honor. But each of you must keep your spirit alive. You must keep those embers burning. If you still have any doubt about the importance of the church and the necessary boldness that's required from our priests, our bishops, our ministers, our rabbis, I offer you the words of Alex Copeland. Quote, I sought for the greatness and genius of America in her commodious harbors and ample rivers, and it was not there. In her fertile fields and boundless prairies, and it was not there. In her rich mines and vast world commerce, and it was not there. Not until I went to the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and her power. America is great because she is good. And if she ever ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. Let me leave you with this thought. As we embark now on the fourth night of freedom, that you all gather here together and go home, support your family and friends. I learned something almost 2 years ago on a hot August day in our nation's capital. 500,000 concerned, patriotic citizens gathered at the Lincoln Memorial. We prayed together. We drew strength from each other as you came out. If we understand who we are as Americans, why we are here, why America is a special place, yes, that shining city on the hill, and if we return to the founding principles and the traditions and the mores of our Judeo-Christian faith, and begin to live our lives guided by the principle of personal responsibility, if we encourage entrepreneurship and free markets, if we fight for limited government, if we cherish our liberty, fight for it with every breath we take, and if we do it with confidence in America's future, and with a smile on our face, hand extended to our fellow Americans, and with a profound belief that all we have has been given to us by our Creator, then, my friends, we can and we will make things right. Thank you. God bless this country.